Welcome to the 7.3 notes finding zeros. So there are three main parts of a parabola: vertex, y-intercept, and zeros. I'm going to write the formulas for the vertex and the y-intercept really quick. This is what we mainly talked about in 7.1 and 7.2. Negative b over 2a is the vertex, and then you take that number and you plug it in for x. What I mean by plug in for x is basically substitute it in the equation for x. For the y-intercept, you plug in 0 for x always, because x is always 0 on the y-intercept, and it's always going to end up being your last number. We're not doing these two parts today. I'm just saying, hey, those are still two out of the three main parts of a parabola. The third part is this one, and instead of being 0, y, it's always going to be x, 0. So basically, you're going to set the equation equal to 0 and solve. Now, there are two different ways to solve that we're going to talk about today: square root method and factoring. Because when you have something with an x squared, you've got to get a little bit fancier with how you get rid of that squared. And square root is one way, factoring is the other way. So I'm just going to kind of jump right in. For the square root method, you're going to solve it like a regular equation. You're trying to get x by itself. But at the very end, you need to get rid of the power of 2 by using a square root. And these will kind of solve a little bit more naturally. We're going to use this method when there's only two terms, because b equals 0. What I mean by that is the number in the middle that's supposed to have x with it, there isn't one, so it's got a 0 technically. That's why it's not showing up. And move my paper up a little bit. Basically, what we're going to do here is change this side to 0. That's what I mean by set the equation equal to 0. And then you want to solve for x. So we want to get rid of the 16. The opposite of subtracting 16 is adding 16. And then you have two options actually for this last step. One of them is to ask yourself, what number squared is 16? Hopefully you know that 4 squared is 16. The other way is to take the square root like this on both sides. What that does is it gets rid of this, and you just have x equals. And then when you do the square root in the calculator, it's only going to give you one answer. It is the blue button, and then the x squared button, which is kind of diagonal up from 7. Square root 16 is 4. Now, here's the issue, is whenever you do the square root on both sides, you need this, plus minus, because 4 squared is 16, and negative 4 squared is 16. So all of your square root method ones will have the same answer twice, but one of the times it will be negative. Okay, we're going to do the same kind of thing on the second example. This is just 0. So then we're going to add the 225, because that's the opposite of subtracting it. Okay, that cancels. And over here, 0 plus 225 is just 225. You'll notice that it's not very hard to add or subtract things from 0, because they don't really change. And then we divide by 9. This is where you do need a calculator to assist you a little bit. 225 divided by 9 is 25. And then you've got your two options. Either ask yourself, what number squared is 25? Hopefully you know that that's 5 and negative 5. Second option, hit the blue button, then the x squared button, and type 25. 5. Just don't forget that there's one positive, one negative. And then over here on the right, it doesn't say find the zeros because it's already got an equation for you. What we're going to do is just solve this like a regular equation, as if this was negative 36x plus 42 equals negative 7. So start by subtracting the 42. You just don't have a 0 on the other side at the moment, and that's okay. Now we're about to get into some fractions. I'm going to divide by 36, but 49 does not divide by 36. So what we're going to do is, negative 36. First of all, those two negatives divide both positive. Do the top and the bottom on their own. So the square root of 49 is 7, and the square root of 36 is 6. So your answer would be 7 over 6 and negative 7 over 6. Here's proof. We're doing the square root of 49 and then the square root of 36. So it's 7 over 6 and negative 7 over 6. When you get a fraction, just do the square root of the top and then the square root of the bottom. Now let's talk about factoring. Numbers that multiply to 0. 0 times 4 is 0. 0 times 100 is 0. And 0 times 0 is 0. Notice how in every single pair, one number must be 0. It is impossible to multiply to 0 if one of the numbers isn't 0. This helps us because when we factor something, go from this to this is just one of the numbers. Once we know what x is, this is the other one. You're just multiplying those two things. So either this one equals 0 or this one equals 0. And those are super easy to solve because now there's no squared. So the other way of getting rid of the squared besides square rooting is to factor it, because then you only have an x left in each parentheses, which gives you answers of negative 18, because you subtract the 18 to this side, and negative 4, because you subtract the 4 to this side. And negative 18 plus 18 is 0, negative 4 plus 4 is 0. So you just have to factor the right side. Two numbers that multiply to 30 and add to 17. We've done this before, 2 and 15, which is going to give you answers of negative 2 and negative 15. Two numbers that multiply to negative 12 and add to negative 11. There's your options. There we go. This one adds to 11 right now. I want negative 11, so I switch to the negative. I don't know what's wrong with me on this problem today. 1 and negative 12 make negative 11. So it's x plus 1 and x minus 12. There's your two answers. On the third example, you just have to subtract the 8. And then you're looking for two numbers that multiply to negative 28 and add to 3. 7 and negative 4. Okay, in order to factor, one of the sides has to be 0. Up here, we kind of got rid of that eventually, but down here it has to equal 0. And our two answers are going to be negative 7 and 4. It's always going to be the opposite because negative 7 plus 7 is 0 and 4 minus 4 is 0.